At Thanksgiving dinner, I caught my husband and my sister-in-law in the middle of an affair. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. My parents were laughing in the kitchen. Everyone was talking about gratitude, family, and how lucky we were to still have each other. I wasn't supposed to go upstairs. I just wanted to grab my phone from the guest room. That's when I saw them. My husband, Mark, standing far too close to Evelyn, my sister-in-law. His voice dropped the second I opened the door. Her smile froze, his hand pulled back like it had been burned. For a moment, the world went completely silent. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. I walked back downstairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Then I looked straight at my brother, Daniel. He met my eyes. And instead of anger, he smiled. "Don't worry," he whispered calmly. "The main course is about to be served." Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday. Not because of the food, though my mother took the turkey very seriously, but because it was the one day of the year when our family slowed down and sat at the same table without distractions. No rush schedules. No unanswered calls. Just familiar faces, shared memories, and the comforting illusion that everything was exactly where it should be. That year, the dinner was held at my parents' house, the same house my brother Daniel and I had grown up in. The walls were decorated with framed family photos, some of them slightly crooked, all of them filled with smiles frozen in time. My mother, Grace, moved around the kitchen with practiced confidence, humming softly as she checked the oven for the third time. My father, Robert, was already stationed in the living room, pretending to watch football while secretly listening to every conversation. I arrived early with my husband, Mark. He squeezed my hand as we walked up the front steps. "Your mom's house always smells the same," he said with a smile. "It feels safe." I smiled back, feeling a familiar warmth spread through my chest. Safe. That was the word I would have used too about my family, about my marriage, about my life. Mark and I had been married for 6 years. We didn't have a perfect marriage, but we had a quiet one, and I had always believed that was better. He was calm where I was emotional, practical where I tended to overthink. When people asked me what kind of husband he was, I always said the same thing: reliable. Daniel arrived shortly after us with his wife, Evelyn. She looked effortlessly elegant, as always, perfect hair, soft smile, the kind of presence that filled a room without demanding attention. She hugged me warmly and told me how grateful she was to be part of our family, how lucky she felt. "I don't know what I'd do without you all," she said, her voice gentle and sincere. I believed her. Daniel seemed relaxed, more than usual. He joked with our father, teased my mother about over-seasoning the stuffing, and gave me a quick look that lingered just a second longer than normal. At the time, I thought it was nothing, just one of those silent sibling moments that needed no explanation. As the afternoon went on, the house filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Conversations overlapped work, travel plans, childhood stories we had all heard 100 times before. Mark stayed close to me, his arm resting lightly on the back of my chair whenever we sat down. If someone had asked me then, I would have said without hesitation that I was exactly where I belonged. I had no idea that the table was already set for something else entirely. Dinner was still at least 30 minutes away. My mother insisted on perfect timing, which meant no one was allowed near the turkey until she gave the signal. To fill the time, everyone scattered around the house. My father turned the volume up on the TV. Daniel stepped outside to take a phone call. Evelyn offered to help my mother in the kitchen. Mark stayed behind with me in the living room, or at least, he did for a few minutes. I noticed his absence when the conversation grew quieter. At first, I didn't think much of it. Mark had a habit of wandering off during family gatherings, checking messages, stepping outside for air, anything to avoid small talk. I assumed he'd gone to the bathroom or upstairs to take a call. Still, something felt off. I glanced toward the staircase and realized Evelyn wasn't in the kitchen anymore either. My mother was alone, busy basting the turkey, humming to herself. I asked her casually if Evelyn needed help. She said she was going to grab something upstairs. My mother replied without looking up. "Probably lipstick or something." I nodded, trying to ignore the uneasy flutter in my chest. A few minutes passed. Mark didn't come back. The feeling grew stronger, an instinct I couldn't explain but couldn't silence either. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Thanksgiving dinners were chaotic. People moved around. There was nothing wrong with two adults being in the same house at the same time. Still, my feet carried me toward the stairs. I left my phone upstairs, I called out, mostly to convince myself I had a reason. The guest room door was slightly open. I pushed it gently. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Mark and Evelyn stood too close for comfort, but not close enough for something obvious. Their conversation stopped the second the door creaked. Mark turned toward me too quickly. Evelyn took a small step back, smoothing her sweater as if she had been adjusting it for a while. "Oh," she said lightly. "Penelope. We were just—" She didn't finish the sentence. No one did. The silence was heavy, pressing down on my ears. Mark's face had gone pale. His eyes darted between me and the door behind me, as if calculating something. I noticed his hand slowly move away from where it had been resting too near her arm to feel innocent. "I was just looking for my phone," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. Mark nodded too fast. "Yeah, of course. I was just helping Evelyn find something." Evelyn forced a smile. It didn't reach her eyes. I scanned the room. Nothing was out of place. The bed untouched. The window closed. No obvious signs of anything inappropriate. And yet my heart was pounding so hard it made my chest ache. I picked up my phone from the nightstand, even though I knew it had been there all along. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. "Mom's waiting." "Right," Mark replied. "We're coming." I walked out without another word. As I descended the stairs, my legs felt weak, like they might give out at any second. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. But something stopped me. A quiet voice in my head whispered that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a warning. When I reached the bottom step, I looked across the room and saw my brother Daniel watching me from the doorway. Our eyes met. And in that instant, I knew whatever I had just walked in on was only the beginning. I didn't go back to the living room right away. Instead, I walked into the hallway and pretended to study one of the old family photos hanging on the wall. Daniel and me as kids, grinning with missing teeth, arms wrapped around each other like the world couldn't touch us. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists. I felt someone step beside me. "Penny," Daniel said quietly. Only he was allowed to call me that. "Are you okay?" I swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" He didn't ask where or why. He just nodded and opened the door to my father's study, the one room in the house where conversations had always happened behind closed doors. He shut the door gently and turned to face me. The moment we were alone, everything I had been holding in came rushing out. "They're lying," I whispered. "Mark and Evelyn. I just saw them upstairs." "I don't know what exactly is going on, but—" Daniel raised a hand. "Sit down," he said calmly. That was when I noticed something was wrong. Not with me, but with him. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't angry. He wasn't pacing the room or swearing under his breath the way I expected him to. He was composed. I stared at him, my voice trembling. "Daniel, why aren't you saying anything?" He leaned back against the desk, crossed his arms, and studied my face like he was making sure I was still standing. "Because," he said carefully, "I was hoping you wouldn't have to find out this way." My heart dropped. "What does that mean?" He exhaled slowly. "It means you didn't imagine what you saw." The room seemed to tilt. "You knew?" I asked. "You knew something was wrong." "For a while," he admitted. "Not everything, but enough." I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, relief that I wasn't crazy, mixed with a sharp sting of hurt. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because I needed proof. And because I needed to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I snapped. "From my own husband?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "From being blindsided. From being pressured into silence. From making a move that could cost you later." I shook my head. "This is my marriage. My life." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I didn't act without you." There was a knock at the door. "Dinner's almost ready," my mother called from the hallway. 5 minutes." Daniel glanced at the door, then back at me. A small, unsettling smile crossed his face, not cruel, not smug, just deliberate. "Listen to me," he said. "You don't confront them. Not yet." My chest tightened. "Then what do I do?" He leaned in and whispered the words that sent a chill through me. "Nothing," he said. You sit at the table, you smile, and you let them think they're safe. I searched his eyes. Daniel, what are you planning? He straightened, adjusting his sleeves like we were discussing the weather. Don't worry, he said quietly. The main course is about to be served. The dining table looked exactly the way it always did. White tablecloth, polished silverware, candles flickering softly in the center. The turkey sat proudly at the head of the table, golden and untouched, as if nothing in the world could possibly be wrong. I took my seat between Mark and my mother. Mark leaned closer, his hand brushing my knee under the table in a way that would have once felt comforting. Now, it made my skin crawl. I kept my face still, my smile practiced, just like Daniel had told me. Across from me, Evelyn laughed at something my father said. Her voice was light, controlled. She looked relaxed, too relaxed for someone who had just been caught in a lie upstairs. Daniel stood at the head of the table instead of sitting down. Before we eat, he said casually, lifting his glass, I just want to say something. Everyone paused. This year, Daniel continued, I've been thinking a lot about what Thanksgiving really means. Gratitude, honesty, family. My mother smiled. That's sweet, Daniel. Mark nodded along. Yeah, well said. Daniel's eyes flicked to him just for a second. I think, Daniel went on, we should all be grateful for the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. A faint tension settled over the table, subtle but unmistakable. I felt Mark stiffen beside me. Evelyn tilted her head. What do you mean by that? Daniel smiled politely. I mean that secrets have a way of showing up at the worst possible time. Silence. My father cleared his throat. Son, if this is about work, it's not, Daniel said calmly. It's about trust. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Daniel set his glass down and finally took his seat, but not before placing his phone on the table, screen facing up. Earlier this year, he said, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. Messages deleted too quickly, conversations that stopped when I walked into a room. Mark shifted in his chair. Daniel, this really isn't the time. Actually, Daniel interrupted gently, this is the perfect time. He tapped his phone. The screen lit up. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, he continued. So I did what anyone should do when something feels wrong. My mother frowned. Daniel, I asked questions, he said, and I listened. Evelyn's smile had faded now. Are you accusing someone of something? Daniel looked straight at her. I'm inviting honesty. The room felt smaller. The candles flickered as if reacting to the shift in the air. Mark leaned toward me and whispered, What is he doing? I didn't answer. Daniel slid his phone slightly forward. Some of these messages, he said calmly, were sent during family gatherings, including tonight. My father pushed his chair back slightly. Enough, Daniel. This is Thanksgiving. Yes, Daniel replied. That's why I chose tonight. Evelyn's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. I don't know what you think you're implying, she said, her voice tight. But you're making everyone uncomfortable. Daniel nodded. Good. The word landed like a crack of thunder. Because discomfort, he continued, is sometimes the price of truth. He turned to me then, his voice softening just a little. Penelope, he said, I want you to know something before we go any further. I looked up at him, my throat dry. You are not alone, he said, and no matter what happens next, this family stands with you. Mark shot to his feet. That's enough, he said sharply. I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't sit here and be. Daniel raised a hand. Sit down, he said quietly. Mark hesitated, and for the first time that night, I saw fear in his eyes. The turkey remained untouched. The main course, I realized, hadn't even begun. The room felt frozen in time. No one moved, no one spoke. Even the football game in the living room seemed to fade into the background, its noise suddenly distant and unreal. Daniel remained standing, his voice steady but unmistakably firm. This isn't about embarrassment, he said. It's about accountability. Mark's face had gone pale. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped. You're twisting things. Daniel nodded once, as if he'd expected that response. That's what I thought you'd say. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin folder, setting it gently on the table beside the turkey. The sound it made when it touched the wood was soft, but it echoed in my chest like a warning. I didn't start looking because I wanted to, Daniel continued. I started because I had to. My mother shook her head slowly. Daniel, please. If this is some misunderstanding. It isn't, he said, turning to her with respect. And I'm sorry you're finding out this way. Evelyn finally spoke. You went through my private things? She asked, her voice trembling with indignation. That's inappropriate. Daniel met her gaze. What's inappropriate is using my sister's trust to move money without her knowledge. I sucked in a sharp breath. What? Mark spun toward Daniel. You've lost your mind. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, bank statements, and screenshots neatly organized, labeled, undeniable. He slid one page toward me. Penelope, he said gently, do you recognize this account? I stared at the numbers, my hands shaking. That's our joint account. Yes, Daniel said. Or it was. Mark took a step toward the table. This is private. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Sit down. Mark froze. For the past 8 months, Daniel continued, money has been transferred in small amounts, carefully spaced, just under the threshold that would trigger automatic alerts. I felt dizzy. Why would... Evelyn cut in sharply. This is ridiculous. You're accusing us of something criminal over normal finances? Daniel turned another page. These transfers, he said, ended up in an account under Evelyn's maiden name, an account Penelope didn't know existed. The silence was crushing. My father sank into his chair. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. I looked at Evelyn. Is that true? She didn't answer. Mark laughed suddenly too loudly, too quickly. This is being blown out of proportion. Daniel didn't react. It's also not the only issue. He gestured toward the hallway. Lisa. The door to the study opened, and a woman I didn't recognize stepped into the room. She was calm, professional, and carried herself with quiet authority. This is Lisa Monroe, Daniel said, an attorney specializing in family and financial law. Mark's confidence shattered. You brought a lawyer to Thanksgiving? Lisa spoke gently. I'm here to make sure no one is pressured, threatened, or misled tonight. She turned to me. Penelope, I represent you if you choose. My voice barely worked. I didn't ask for this. Daniel met my eyes. I know. That's why I asked for you, Lisa continued. Based on what I've reviewed, there are clear signs of financial deception. Any further transfers would carry serious legal consequences. Evelyn stood abruptly. This is insane. You can't do this to me. Daniel didn't raise his voice. I'm not doing anything. I'm stopping you. Mark finally looked at me, not with love, not with concern, but with calculation. Penny, he said quietly, let's not make this worse than it already is. Something inside me hardened. I trusted you, I said. That wasn't a mistake. What you did after that was a choice. The room was silent again. Daniel closed the folder. This dinner isn't about punishment, he said. It's about protection, Penelope's rights, her future. Lisa nodded. From this moment forward, she said, any communication regarding finances or assets should go through legal counsel. Evelyn's eyes darted around the room, searching for support. There was none. Mark lowered himself back into his chair, defeated. The turkey sat untouched. Thanksgiving, I realized, wasn't being ruined. It was being reclaimed. Dinner never actually happened. No one reached for the serving utensils. No one asked for seconds. Eventually, my mother stood up and quietly began clearing the table, as if returning to routine might somehow make sense of what had just unfolded. One by one, the candles were blown out. Daniel asked my parents to sit in the living room. Evelyn retreated upstairs without a word. Mark lingered in the dining room, pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair like a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. Lisa stayed close to me. Take your time, she whispered. You don't have to decide anything tonight. I nodded, grateful for the space. Daniel joined us a moment later. I'll handle the logistics, he said quietly. No one's leaving angry. No one's being cornered. I looked at him. How long have you been holding this together? Long enough, he replied. Too long, probably. Mark finally stopped pacing and turned to me. Can we talk? he asked, his voice low. Alone. My instinct was to say no, but I also knew I needed to hear what he would say, if only to know where I stood. We stepped into the hallway, the distance between us suddenly wider than it had ever been. This didn't have to happen like this, he said. You blindsided me. I laughed softly, the sound hollow. You were moving money behind my back. You were lying to my face. And I'm the one who blindsided you? He looked away. I never meant to hurt you. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. His shoulders slumped. Evelyn and I, it started as conversations. Stress. Things got complicated. You made them complicated, I replied calmly. And you made choices. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. I need space, I said. And I need protection. Lisa appeared at the end of the hallway, as if on cue. Penelope, when you're ready, we can discuss next steps. Temporary financial safeguards. Living arrangements. Mark stiffened. Safeguards? Yes, she said evenly. To prevent further harm. Daniel joined us again. Mark, you'll be staying elsewhere tonight. This is my house too, Mark argued weakly. Daniel's voice remained calm. Not tonight. Mark looked at me one last time. You're really doing this? I met his gaze. I'm finally doing something for myself. He left shortly after, escorted by my father. The front door closed with a quiet finality that echoed through the house. Later, as the night settled, Daniel sat beside me on the couch. I'm sorry you had to find out like this, he said. I wanted to give you control, not take it away. You did, I replied. You stood between me and something that could have destroyed me. My mother joined us, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. You're safe here, she said softly. Whatever comes next, you won't face it alone. As I leaned into her, exhaustion washed over me, but beneath it, something else began to surface. Clarity. Thanksgiving hadn't ended the way I expected, but for the first time in a long while I felt protected, and that, I realized, was something worth being grateful for. The days after Thanksgiving passed in a blur. At first, everything felt unreal, like I was watching my own life from the outside. I stayed at my parents' house for a while, sleeping in my old bedroom, surrounded by familiar walls that suddenly felt like anchors. My mother brought me tea every morning. My father avoided heavy conversations, but he checked on me quietly, the way he always had. Mark didn't contact me directly. All communication went through Lisa, just as she had advised. Accounts were frozen, passwords were changed, documents were reviewed line by line. It was exhausting, but it was also grounding. For the first time in years, I understood exactly where I stood financially, legally, emotionally. Daniel called me every day. Some days we talked about practical things, paperwork, schedules, next steps. Other days we said very little. His presence, steady and unyielding, reminded me that I didn't have to hold everything together on my own. I started seeing a therapist at Lisa's recommendation. At first, I hated it. I hated saying things out loud that made my chest tighten. I hated admitting that I had ignored my instincts for the sake of peace. But slowly, the words became easier. You're not weak for trusting, my therapist told me one afternoon. You're strong for choosing yourself now. That sentence stayed with me. I moved into a small apartment a few weeks later. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I chose the furniture. I decided where things went. Every small decision felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd given away. One evening, as I unpacked the last box, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Proud of you, it read. I smiled, tears welling up in my eyes, not from pain this time, but from relief. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with grand speeches or sudden forgiveness. It came quietly in mornings that felt lighter, in nights when I slept without replaying the past, in the growing certainty that I was capable of building something new. For the first time since that Thanksgiving, I could breathe. And I knew, deep down, that whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. A year passed, not all at once, but day by day, quietly, steadily, like something healing beneath the surface. The legal process unfolded the way real life usually does. Slowly, carefully, without spectacle. Through Lisa, everything was handled by the book. There were boundaries, agreements, and consequences. Nothing dramatic, nothing public, just the truth, documented and respected. Mark eventually moved on. Evelyn disappeared from my life entirely. And I let them go not out of forgiveness but out of self-respect. Daniel and I grew closer in a way we hadn't been since childhood. We spoke honestly now, without assumptions or half-truths. My parents, too, changed. They listened more. They protected more. That Thanksgiving, painful as it was, rewired the way our family understood loyalty. The following November we gathered again. Same house, same table, same recipes. But this time, there were no secrets sitting between us. As we shared what we were grateful for, I found myself speaking without rehearsing the words. "I'm grateful," I said, "for the courage to choose myself even when it was uncomfortable." No one interrupted. No one looked away. Later that night, as I washed dishes with my mother, she squeezed my hand. "You taught us something this year," she said softly. "About honesty, about strength." I smiled. Thanksgiving isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing what truly nourishes us and letting go of what doesn't. I didn't lose a marriage that night. I found my voice. And that was the most meaningful thing ever served at that table.